Hello, Doug Grog here with Neff Automation, and I'm joined with James Aarons with QC Industries Conveyors. So we just stopped here to get some education on some conveyor systems. And so today what we're going to talk about is why QC Conveyors makes it so much easier for implementation, but then also the maintenance side of things. So a couple key points we're going to talk about are the tool-free tension release. We're going to talk about what they do for tracking the belt. Then we're going to talk about the crown pulley, and also a case use for when and when not to use, or why they use the V guide. And what was the other thing? Was there one other thing?
Solid piece frame construction.
Solid piece frame construction. So with that, I'm going to give it over to James, and he's going to take it away.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. So as you guys can see, as we talked about, so we separated tension from tracking. What we've done is we've made that a toolless process. So we actually have a push button, one on this side, and there's also one on the opposing side. So as he comes back around, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push on both of those. I'm going to pull the tail up. That's how we separate tension from tracking. So if you need to take tension off of that belt, let's say you need to clean underneath, you need to replace the belt, that's how you're going to do it. So no tools needed. As he mentioned as well, the way that we're able to accomplish separating tension from tracking is the tracking jacking screw is actually designed as part of the tail pulley. That means that we can quickly and easily replace that tail pulley or quickly and easily replace that belt. And then what we would do is actually slide that back in. We do have notches that are dedicated on the tail pulley, and then they are also on part of the frame. So that's our neutral point. So if you got a new belt from us, you would just put the jacking screw back into its neutral position, and you would flip that tail down. That belt would be retracked and retensioned.
That makes it easy, doesn't it?
So
quite a bit different than your standard conveyor system then. That's
definitely
great.
does. The key element is being able to keep the line running as much as possible. So getting the line back up and running quickly. Another key feature of our product line is the straight line knurl. So on our conveyor, as I remove the belt here, you're going to see we have a straight line knurl on our drive pulley. So number one, our drive pulleys are crowned. So the highest spot is going to be the center of that pulley. But also, in order to make sure that we have the grip, given the fact that this is a 40 millimeter pulley, we do a straight line knurl, which allows for a lateral movement without chewing the carcass of the bottom of the belt. So we're trying to make sure that we can maintain that belt as long as possible and allow for some movement. So that takes us into the other discussion, the other topic, which was the V guide that we can put on the bottom of the belt. So when we use that, it's meant to keep that belt centered, going down the center of the conveyor. Like I said, we do have crown pulleys, so that crown, so the high spot being in the center, makes that belt want to ride to the center of the pulley. However, if we're doing a side load where we're trying to push a product onto the conveyor from the side, or if we're trying to push it off of the conveyor from the side, or in cases where we've got a really long conveyor, we're still going to probably put a V guide on there just to make sure that we're able to maintain that tracking. There are also instances where we want to do it, where we want to put a V guide on it if we're doing a reversing. So if you're going to do start and stopping, forward and reverse, we're going to put a V guide on that as well, just to make sure that we're able to maintain the tracking of that belt. Because a belt is very similar to a rope. So if you're trying to push it, a lot of times it's going to want to try and curl up on itself, whereas if you're pulling it, it's going to want to stay in a straight line. So once we do forward and reverse, we get into a push-pull situation where you're going to want to make sure that we're able to keep that centered. So that's a reason that we would put a V guide on those belts.
Yeah, makes sense. And then
another key feature that we'll talk about while we have the belt off, we'll talk about the fact that, so as you can see, our conveyor is made with a solid piece frame construction. That gives us a couple of key benefits. So we can actually cut into the top slider plate. We can put a backlight in here. We can put magnets in there if we need to. And we still have that structural support given that cross member, the secondary cross member.
Yeah, and that backlight that he was talking about, so actually they've got another conveyor right over here that actually shows where that backlight can be implemented.
Right, and you can see, so we actually work with a company that actually makes a product specifically for us where that sits flush. In those instances, you'll see on the translucent belt that we have here, you do not want to put a V-guide on there because it messes with the backlight. So it messes with your images and those types of things. Another key thing that we'll point out while we have this conveyor is we do have an 11 millimeter nose bar. The other conveyor that we showed has a 40 millimeter pulley. This one actually takes that bend radius. So as we push that back down, it gives you a very tight bend radius all the way down to an 11 millimeter. So if you have a situation where you're trying to butt a secondary conveyor right beside it.
Yeah, right, coming up right next to it.
Correct. Yep. That actually gives you a very minimal gap rather than having two 40 millimeter pulleys that would sit side by side.
Slick. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for that rundown. And that's, yeah, that definitely takes us through some really nice key benefits of the QC conveyor options here. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.